You want to throw them at me? I'll come up and get them. I don't want you to throw your shoulder out.
Don't. I think both of those are peanuts.
My wife doesn't like that, so that's good. She got a whole platter full of them. She been busy this afternoon. Did your daughter make it back from New York?
Yes.
They decided to come back, huh? Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of it going around, that's for sure.
No, these are not all for me. You realize that.
No, that's okay. Thank you. All right, prayer requests. Yes, ma'am. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Kayla, yeah, she's said she's got poison ivy bad, and mm, poison ivy.
Remember Ellen Perdue's family too. His wife Jerry passed away last night.
That's David Merritt's niece.
David Merritt's cousin.
Yeah, his niece. I think it's his niece, wasn't it? Yeah.
Did they say when the funeral's going to be?
They were talking Saturday, I think.
I asked Ellen texted me about it. I asked him to let me know when the funeral's going to be.
Yeah, I think the way David talked Saturday, but I don't know if that's finalized yet or not.
I don't know the details exactly, and Kim was trying to figure it out today, and she didn't get the whole story, but Miriam, as Danny and Miriam Smallwood's
Grandson.
He did get killed, right?
That's what Jen heard.
Yeah, what she was assuming too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of it going around for sure.
The flu's come back. I'm like, it didn't ever go anywhere. You just hadn't been acknowledged it. But anyway, it's rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I didn't have COVID, but I have allergy because the wind keeps blowing things in.
Mm.
Is Jen doing better?
She had a better day today. She's hoping to go back to work tomorrow, but yeah, she had a better day today.
Is she sick from COVID or?
COVID. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Combination.
they diagnosed her with COVID, and whatever else you want to add to that. I'm not going to say that, Brenda. But if you said that she has other problems, I didn't say that. You said she has underlying issues. That's what I. So let me just make sure we get this on record. Brenda said she has underlying issues and. Yeah.
Well, I didn't get out of the house till Sunday from Christmas.
Yeah.
I didn't see my family, so and it wasn't COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They said it was the flu. So go figure that.
Mm-hmm.
Besides him.
Mm-hmm.
But we got along, believe it or not, because I couldn't argue.
Did that help, Roger?
Yes, sir. You know, Timmy,
Uh-huh.
coffee, that stopped all that. I realized it's like, hey, I want this other.
Continue to pray for Jennifer's sister, her oldest sister, Glenda. She had a stroke before Christmas and just the struggles and things going on from that. She needs our prayers.
Mm.
Survived her stroke, but she's got to have some rehab. I haven't seen her. I've been getting texts from my niece, but she has tested positive for COVID, and Joy tells me that she has no symptoms, but they did move her to the COVID side.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like how they deny you medical treatment you need if you
Or put it on hold.
Mm-hmm.
whatever interactions you have.
How is David Merritt doing?
He's doing well in terms of just the symptom side of it. He's supposed to go, I think, see the doctor tomorrow, and I think he's cleared for work either this weekend or first part of next week. So, yeah, but yeah, as far as just the symptom side of it and all that, he's doing really well. They still obviously got to figure out what's going to go on with checking out his heart and all that, but. All right. Roger, since you're still with us, you want to lead us in prayer?
Most kind of gracious Heavenly Father, again, we thank you, Heavenly Father, for all the many blessings that you bestow upon each and every one of us, Father God. Just ask that you lift up the ones that were mentioned here tonight, Father God. If I try to name them, I'll forget half of them, but you know who they are, dear Lord. I just pray that you lift them up, heal their bodies, just heal the world from this COVID virus, flu, whatever it's called, Father God. Just reach down and touch each and every heart and soul, Father God. And just let them know that it was you, that it wasn't science, it wasn't medicine, medication, whatever. It was you that healed their body, Father God. Dear Lord, I ask now that you be with Tony as he brings the word from your Bible, Father God, that we take and apply it to our hearts, Heavenly Father, and just use it in our daily lives. Just forgive us when we fail. In Christ Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. All right. Seemed like forever since we've met. So we're at 1 Samuel chapter 11. We'll back up just a little bit to 10:25, just because it's going to play into chapter 11 and 12. We'll probably get through 12. Just depending on how fast we want to go. because we have covered some of this already in Judges. So 1 Samuel 10:25, Samuel told the people the ordinances of the kingdom, wrote them in the book, placed it before the Lord. Samuel sent all the people away, each to his house. Saul also went to his house at Gibeah, and the valiant men whose hearts God had touched went with him. But certain worthless men said, "How can this one deliver us?" They despised him and did not bring him any present, but he kept silent. So you've got the appointment of Saul as king. Samuel did that. He was hiding behind the baggage. Y'all remember all of that. He is the king that the people were wanting, a king in their own image, their own eyes, and so God does that with Saul and with them. So he's already been anointed. He's already been commanded. Do all that God, do everything that that you find in your hand to do. So as king, what you find in your hand to do is to continue conquering in the land of promise and driving out the Philistines. So chapter 11, now Nahash the Ammonite came and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." But Nahash the Amorite said to them, I will make it with you on this condition, that I will gouge out the right eye of every one of you. Thus I will make it a reproach on all of Israel. The elders of Jabesh said to him, "Let us alone for 7 days, that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. Then if there is no one to deliver us, we will come out to you." Now the whole thing seems strange, because first off, you're like, okay, so our options are, we will serve you, and they say, okay, as long as we're able to gouge out your right eye, and then you're going to think about it, okay, let's think about it. To gouge out their right eye is to basically render them what would seem to be worthless, because it's your dominant eye. It's your dominant shooting eye. We think about it in relation with guns, but with them, think about it in relation to spears and bows and arrows. And so if you take out their right eye, basically in terms of their value and worth, they don't have any. But it's interesting because what do they say? Yeah, they think about it, and they think about it in the sense of, if there's no one to deliver us. So they're not going out and fighting for the land that God's given them to begin with against the Ammonites. So if nobody's going to deliver us, then we'll make this covenant with you. His response to them is, we'll make the covenant if we render you useless. But you get the sense that these people are useless in that sense of carrying out God's command to begin with. So 11 and 12, you just see everything that's going wrong in relation to Israel and leadership in general. So the messengers came to Gibeah. Now you want to make sure to mark down in your margin there Judges 19 through 21, because remember, all of this comes into play. Saul is a Benjamite, and as such, we remember what happened with them from Judges 19 through 21. That's the whole story of the Levitical priest that comes into the city, and the men of the city, like Sodom and Gomorrah, want his concubine. They end up raping her. He takes her, and she's dead, cuts her to pieces, sends her throughout all of the land, right? Then when that happens, God calls Israel to go up against Benjamin, and they do, and basically wipe them out to the point in which they're weeping over them, and there's not enough women in order for them to reproduce and their tribe exist. So they go to another tribe and take those women. They go to another group, take those women, and that's why from here those people came. And Saul is probably a product, a child of that whole situation. So all that's coming back. All that's coming back now. So they came to Gibeah of Saul and spoke these words in the hearing of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. Now behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen, and he said, "What is the matter with the people that they weep?" So they related to him the words of the men of Jabesh. The Spirit of the Lord of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. Again, why is he angry? That's his hometown, more than likely, right? Probably where his great-grandmother came from. So he took a yoke of oxen, cut them in pieces, sent them throughout the territory of Israel by the hand of the messenger, saying, "Whoever does not come out after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen." Then the dread of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out as one man. So Saul's first act as king is connected to Israel's worst act in Judges. So the whole thing has just got a big exclamation point of saying this just is not, there's just not a lot of good that's coming here. He numbered them in Bezek, and the sons of Israel were 300,000, the men of Judah 30,000. They said to the messengers who had come, "Thus you shall say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, you will have deliverance." So the messengers went and told the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. The men of Jabesh said, "Tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you." Excuse me. The next morning Saul put the people in 3 companies. They came into the midst of the camp at the morning watch. He struck down the Ammonites until the heat of the day. Those who survived were scattered so that no 2 of them were left together. Then the people said to Samuel, "Who is he that said, 'Surely Saul shall reign over us'? Bring the men that we may put them to death." But Saul said, "Not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished deliverance in Israel." Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they also offered sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all of the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. Great victory, right? Great victory. But there's a cloud hanging over top of it, 2 clouds. One is because, what we already said, it's connected to Israel's worst moment in history so far in the book of Judges, with this Sodom and Gomorrah-like event. Who represent the people of Israel are Sodom and Gomorrah, and this event is connected to that. You've got worthless men who don't accept Saul as king. Saul doesn't say anything, but then what do the people want to do to those men after they get victory? They didn't want to do it before, but after they get victory, then what do they want to do? Well, then they want to go kill them. Well, what's that? What is that? Right? And then lastly, you've got the men of Jabesh Gilead that didn't even go to fight. So Israel and Judah deliver a group of people that they themselves don't even go out to fight for the land that God has promised. But there's great victory, right? So it's a lot of times waves come in. It's like being out in the ocean, and when you first walk out into the ocean for the first time, and you feel you don't really realize how strong the current and the tide is, and it kind of knocks you off your feet. So you land on your bum, and the waves of Israel. It's a roller coaster ride. It's a roller coaster ride. So one would think right now, life is good, but as the story unfolds, you realize there's all these rain clouds that are on top of Israel, as they defeated after they defeated the Amalekites. So what do we expect next, right? Is everything going to continue to be green and growing, right? Well, Samuel brings us to a point. God through Samuel brings us to a point of saying, okay, this is how God assesses all of this. It's very important to be very careful on how you discern what things actually are. What seems to everybody around the world as a victory, even your own people, your own kind, as this is a great victory and this is right and this is good and all that, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that God sees that. And when you're in the midst of a wilderness, famine, feel like you're starving and God is not there, and everybody says, we had it better back in Egypt, does not mean that that's the way God sees that. So if there's anything that this story unfolds and tells us is, you better be careful on how you discern what actually is in relation to the experiences you are experiencing. Because most of the time, man gets it wrong. And majority is not always right. Is not always right. Yeah. Yeah. The book of Samuel is one of the top books in making analogies. It makes connections that almost are never seen. But the writer is continually making connections to other things that are pointing you to the way things actually are. So in the middle of this big battle that's fixing to come, where Israel needs to be conquering people, and now you've got the Amalekites that are coming in, and Jabesh Gilead, we need help, and Saul rises to the forefront. It looks like one thing on the surface, and the writer is telling you it's not that at all. It's not that at all. Just because Saul and Israel is going to get victory here does not mean that that's God's stamp of approval saying you are a great, good, righteous people. It's not what's happening at all. And we have to be, and I think what the writer is saying there, God through the writer is saying there is that in relation to what you're saying there, Roger, with patience, is that you absolutely have to have patience, and you have to step back and you have to see a very, very large, big picture. And you look back in the rearview mirror, and as you look back, it gives you a point of reference to look forward and say, what's coming, and then what is right now? How do we discern what is right now? And God gives us enough through His grace and Spirit to discern those things. So I was having a conversation this week with a guy who had said, it just seems like the more knowledge we have, the less knowledge we actually have. And probably a better way of what he was thinking is we have more information right now at our hands than what we've ever had before to be able to glean from and make a decision. But it's like we can't. We have the least amount of ability to use that knowledge well. And my response to him was, my opinion and my take on that is It's because mankind as a whole, and I would classify most confessing Christians in this same statement. I'm not saying that us and them. I'm talking about confessing Christians as well. That the Bible speaks clearly that the beginning of wisdom comes at its very beginning from a fear of God. And we have no respect for God. We have no respect for God. We have no respect for the things of God. We have no respect for God's Word. We have no respect for the gathering together and the need of being together to encourage one another. We have no respect for any of those things. Well, we're not wiser. We are wise in our own estimation.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
But yet, when they take God out of that picture, they're not wiser, they're weaker.
Absolutely. 100%.
And that's like with the pandemic, so many, back home watching online, to the churches are almost empty from, just being complacent, wanting to, just watch it from home instead of going to church.
Well,
There's so many things that people use as excuses.
absolutely.
What I'm
Sure.
saying. You shouldn't fall away from your congregation just because of a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, and you have the Proverbs, which everybody knows, 3, 5, and 6, almost everybody knows. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not in your own understanding. Well, the two hinges there are trust and lean. So if he says, don't lean on your own understanding, in essence, you could reverse those two words, don't trust in your own understanding. And then on the flip side of that, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean on the Lord with all of your heart. So, but there's none of that. There's none of that. So some might say, right or wrong, whatever, with the last couple of years that it should point America at least, and probably the world for that matter, you would think that those kinds of things would point you to God. You don't ever hear about God in relation to any of the things that are going on in relation to any of the health and sickness and all that kind of stuff. I don't hear anything about it. You hear absolutely zero about it. And so a healthy fear of God should not cause you to run away from God, but run towards God. There's no running towards God. And so, we have to be careful, and I say all of that not to make us them, because I really don't see much of a distinction in people who are confessing to be the church and confessing to be Christians. I really don't see much of a distinction in these things between those two groups of people. So I'm not making this us and them thing. What I'm saying in relation to this particular passage is, one of the things it's bringing out is you have to be careful in how you discern things. Because the majority of people, and not us and them, majority of people discern things a certain way. That does not mean that that's the way that God is discerning these things. We now have a king who is head and shoulders over everyone else, who in the moment when we were first confronted with the Amalekites, came to the forefront and brought 300,000+ people with him, and we drove them out. Sounds like a great victory, but through the whole story it's saying there's major problems with this story because it's connected to Israel's low point, which is connected to Sodom and Gomorrah, which is connected to these people who are supposed to be leading the way and driving these people out, aren't even in the fight. So, you come to the end of the victory and it's kind of like, it's a great victory. It's a great victory. Why don't I feel like it's a great victory? And that's really the way you should come to the end of that. I've got mixed emotions right now because it's a great victory. I should be feeling really great about this victory, and yet some reason I don't because I see all of these other things in relation to this victory. We've said once before, you have to be careful because the process is the plan in order for you to get someplace. So in other words, if I would lie, cheat, and steal and absolutely give away my integrity to gain my goal, when I get my goal, what do I have? I'm not really able to enjoy it, am I? Because of the process it took to get there, right? Well, that's kind of the way you feel right here. You're kind of like, why don't we feel different about this? Well, Samuel's fixing to say.
Dorothy and I had which is your aunt, my sister-in-law, had an interesting conversation. One of the things that we said, we both agreed on, is we said we see the dwindling of the people in church, different things like that, commitment, etc. But there's nobody to blame for that except us.
Mm-hmm.
We're to blame.
Yep.
Not technology, not pandemic, nothing. My dad and mother and her dad and mother. My dad, I was raised until the day that I got married and so was Beverly's. Every single solitary meal we opened with prayer. Every single solitary meal, not one was missed that we didn't read the Bible. When we were finished eating, then we could go ahead and everyone sat there and we read the Bible. Not somebody eating and reading the Bible. Not the TV on, not the radio on. We sat and read the Bible together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went ahead and we closed with prayer and then we discussed the Bible. And we wonder why, and I didn't follow through with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anybody else here has.
Mm-hmm.
But we wonder why that our kids and young people, they start going to college and they fall away and we don't know why. They say they should know better. It's because we didn't take that time. We didn't sit there and discuss God's Word with them and tell them the importance. I know Beverly's parents were the same way. It was extremely important that we knew about the Bible. I still can quote verses that my mom taught me on her knees years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Songs, on and on and on. And I look in the mirror and I get a tear in my heart because I know I failed. And I know that we failed. And we can talk about everything as far as church is concerned and everything else, but we've got to look at ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's high time that we change and we get back to being committed so that others will be committed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our stewardship responsibility ends with us, right?
We
Mm-hmm.
know the rest of the story, yeah.
Yep. Yep. So do you just this passage brings all these things out in terms of being careful in relation to that and how you discern it. So Samuel brings that up. Samuel says to all the people, chapter 12, "Behold, I have listened to your voice and all that you said to me. I have appointed a king over you. Now here is the king walking before you. I am old and gray. Behold, my sons are with you, and I have walked before you from my youth even to this day. Here I am, bear witness against me before the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes with it? I will restore it to you." So if he's making reference to this, who did that? Who did this before Samuel? Eli and his sons. Yeah. He's bringing them back to Eli and his sons, and he's in essence saying, have I been to you like Eli and his sons were to you? Okay. They said, "You've not defrauded us or oppressed us or taken anything from any man's hand." He said to them, "The Lord is witness against you, and his anointed is witness this day that you have found nothing in my hand." And they said, "He is witness." So it's like a court case. Have I done you wrong in any way? And in essence, what he's saying is, I've done what you've asked. What did they ask for? We want a king. We want a king that looks just like us. And he says, I've done what you've asked. Now you tell me, have I done anything that you've experienced before that's given you reason to ask for that? Lord is a witness here, as I am. And they say, you've not done anything. He says, okay. The Lord is your witness. The Lord is the witness. Verse 6. Samuel said to the people, it is who? It is the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers up from the land of Egypt. So now take your stand, that I may plead with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did for you and your fathers. When Jacob went into Egypt and your fathers cried out to the Lord, then the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God. So he sold them into the hand of Sisera, captain of the army of Hazor, and into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. So he's brought them through the Exodus, and then he brings them through what? Judges. He brought them through the Exodus, brought them through Judges. He says, they cried out to the Lord and said, we have sinned because we have forsaken the Lord, served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. But now deliver us from the hands of our enemies, and we will serve you. And the Lord sent Jerubbaal and Badin and Jephthah and Samuel, and delivered you from the hands of your enemies all around, so that you lived in security. So now he brings them all the way up to the present. You were in distress. You cried out to God. What did God do? God delivered you. God saved you. God sent men to provide for you. God always took care of you. You went south, and God turned you over. You cried out to God, and what did God do? God continued to deliver you. It's almost like he's saying, have I defrauded you? No, you have not. Has God defrauded you? No, he has not. Who continually is turning south? Man is continually turning south. We are continually turning south. When you saw Nahash, the king of the sons of Ammon, came against you, you said to me, no, but a king shall reign over us, although the Lord your God was your king. Nahash came up and you saw him coming, and instead of you saying and looking back at how God has continually delivered you, and you saying, God is our king, we're good, you said, no. No. Appoint a king over us. No, but a king shall reign over us, although the Lord your God was your king. Now, therefore, here is the king whom you have chosen, whom you have asked for, and behold, the Lord has set a king over you. How would you like to be Saul after that speech? I mean, how would you like to be Saul after that speech? God, the Lord God was your king and continually delivered, and it wasn't enough. You asked for a king in your own eyes. You asked for a king that looked just like you. Behold, here's your king. And points to Saul. You never know. We have in our minds. That's why I love the book, because it really makes you stop and be startled. We have in our minds, well, this is how God works, and this is how God's life is going to work through me. Saul was a man that God used for the purposes at that time that God desired to use. But nobody looks and says, I want to be Saul. But God had a purpose in appointing Saul as king at this time, because the king asked the people asked for a king that looked just like them, great and mighty in their own eyes. Saul fit that bill, and God used Saul for that purpose. You know, we think that we have to dictate what a being used by God and a win is by our criteria. It's such a load of whatever you want to call it. It's a mess. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. If that's the case, Jeremiah was a failure. He proclaimed to the people, nope, what you're doing is not right. God's going to judge, while everybody else around was saying, oh no, prosperity gospel, prosperity gospel, prosperity gospel. Jeremiah dies in Egypt, which is he's considered with the rest of Israel to be cursed. And Jeremiah did exactly what God desired for him to do. He was dropped in the bottom of a cistern. I mean, he is what we'll get to these next few weeks in the book of the chapter of faith. Men this world was not worthy of. He dropped in a cistern. So, you know, a lot of times you feel like whatever it is God's appointed you to, that it doesn't have worth. Be careful how you discern that. Saul's not meant to be David. David's not meant to be Saul. That was God's plan. And none of this is outside God's plan, because Samuel believes that it's God who appointed Saul. All the people that believe that it's God who's appointed Saul, because they cast lots in order for Saul to come about. God delivers him. God his Spirit comes upon him, so he prophesies to show the people that it's God who's appointed Saul. God's hand, when Saul hears of what is happening at Jabesh Gilead, his Spirit comes mightily upon Saul for everybody to see that it's God who is working through Saul. So it's a book that's saying, be careful how you judge things. Careful how you judge things. So he says, now therefore, here is the king, verse 13, whom you have chosen, whom you've asked for. Behold, the Lord has set a king over you. If you will fear the Lord and serve him and listen to his voice and not rebel against the command of the Lord, then both you and also the king who reigns over you will follow the Lord your God. If you will not listen to the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the command of the Lord, then the hand of the Lord will be against you, as it was against your fathers. Even now take your stand and see this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. You continually go astray, but if you would just listen and trust God, he would lead you and lead you through this king. And if this king will lean on and trust God, God will work through this king in a mighty way, in the best possible way that you could imagine. Let me show you this is God who is saying these things. Is it not, verse 17, wheat harvest today? I will call to the Lord that he may send thunder and rain. Then you will know and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord by asking for yourselves a king. All of this has happened, and what they've done is still wicked. They just had great victory, and God looks at it and says, what you've done is wicked, because I was your king and you turned away from me. If you just not turned away from me, what more have you needed? I have not needed any help, but I've chosen to work through people to deliver victory. Why is it that you need help? You know why? Because you don't want me being your king. You don't want God as your king. And the reality is, you can pretty much boil it all down to that. You know what your problem is? You want to be God. You know what your problem is? You can almost, everybody can come, da, 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 da. You know what your problem is? You want to be God. That's right. And here's, period. Well, you know, da, 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 da. No, you know what your problem is? You want to dictate terms. You want to say what's right or wrong. You don't want somebody telling you, you don't want an authority figure in your life telling you that what you're doing is right or wrong. You want to be God, period. Period. And guess what? You're not new at this. you did not invent this. You did not invent this. And, oh, by the way, that's in me as well as it is you. Apart from the grace of God continually moving me and you to see our need of God, we will continually push back and push away. You know why sickness is great? You know why sickness can be great? You know why allergies and sinus and cold can be great? Is because you start thanking God for breath. Now, that should be a Christian response. That should be a Christian response. You can say on both sides of the coin, God, I hate this sickness, but I am grateful because it causes me to look at you and thank you for the breath you give me, as long as you give it to me. It doesn't negate that sickness is a bad thing. But for a Christian, it should push us, point us, direct us back to God. Always can find other people around you that's got it worse. Yeah.
There's nothing that gets your attention more than sickness.
Yeah. You would think, for years I would agree with you, but it just does not seem to be pointing us to God. It's just, I don't know how deep and how wide and how hard it's going to have to be to turn mankind back to God. Or he'll remove his restraining hand until he comes back. It could be that too. Well, what it's showing, so we keep it in big picture. What it's showing, you're right. I don't say this to negate what you're saying. Sometimes I make it sound like I'm always negating. I'm not. What God is showing to the heavenly realm and all of mankind for all of eternity is what man does apart from God. Mankind's philosophy is generally that man gets better of his own self. And God is pointing out to all mankind that apart from the presence of God and apart from the restraining hand of God, man does not move upward, he moves down, he moves away. So we, in our flesh, always have to guard against that. When we see that slippage, we have to guard against that. And it's not all of a sudden, oh, I'm such a bad person. No, you're normal. You're normal. It's just that for us who have the indwelling Spirit of God, it should drive us to recognize our need of God, the glory of God, and the greatness of God. When Saul, we're going to see a contrast of kings. When Saul is confronted, he points left, he points right, he looks up, he looks out, he looks around. When Saul is confronted, both hideous sins, when Saul is confronted, David is confronted, David says, I am that man. That's the difference. You can make an argument that David's sin, if you want to try and measure sin, a person could make an argument that David's sin is worse than Saul's sin. You know, so I don't see sin as necessarily the predominant issue. It's what you do when God confronts you with that sin. The indwelling Spirit of God, when confronted with that sin, we recognize our need of God, and it should cause us to turn back to God. So any of us can get, we're using the example of sickness, any of us can get sick, and we look up a week later or 2 weeks later and we say, you know, that should have drawn me closer to God, but I didn't really even think about God through all of that. Well, now you are. So what does that mean? In this moment now, say, God, here's what was, and here's what is, and here's what needs to be. By your grace, I confess, and draw me closer to you. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because it is at the beginning where Saul, you know, just makes that comment a minute ago where he kind of starts off acknowledging that. But we're going to see character traits within Saul and his personality. When he gets squeezed a certain way, he responds a certain way. And we're going to see that trait that you're talking about. Yeah. So, that's where they're at. So he says, it's harvest time, verse 17, I will call upon the Lord, that he will send thunder and rain. You will know and see your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight by asking for a king, yourselves a king. So Samuel called to the Lord. The Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. Then all the people said to Samuel, pray for your servants to the Lord your God, so that we may not die, for we have added to our sins this evil by asking for ourselves a king. So they come and they say, but see, they're being squeezed in the sense of what, you know, they're being squeezed with their for lack of a better term, their finances. Is this a deep cut conviction in which you're going to see dramatic change, right? So Samuel said to the people, do not fear, for you have committed all this evil, yet do not turn aside from following the Lord. Healthy fear should drive us to God. Healthy fear should drive us to God. But serve the Lord with all your heart. You must not turn aside, for then you would go after futile things, things which cannot profit or deliver because they're futile. For the Lord will not abandon his people. Why will God not abandon his people? Here's the answer. On account of his great name. On account of his great name. God will not abandon his people on account of his great name. What gives a Christian, why do I, Hebrews some kind of look at you with a question mark saying, it almost sounds like you don't believe in the security of the believer. No, I believe in the security of the believer. Why do I believe in the security of the believer? Because God will not forsake his name. And that's really what's going on in Hebrews and it's going on in 1 John. Those who are will be, because God will endure in the life of those who are his. Because it's God who says, I will uphold my name. The Christian is called to continually live in faith in that. We are continually trusting in that. So we are continually a dependent people. We never lose dependency. We never move from we are saved to be independent of our need of God. That's not a salvation experience. Salvation shows us greater and greater each day how much we need God. And then gives us faith, trust to trust in Him. Why? Because He says, I will uphold my name. He will uphold His name. Because the Lord has been pleased to make you a people for Himself. And this question comes up a lot. Why Israel? Why Israel? And we could say the same thing. Why us? Why us? Because God was pleased to say, I'm calling you. I'm calling you. It is not because we were so wise and great and we saw what other people didn't see. No. We were part of a lineup of 10 people, all of which who committed treason, blasphemy, murder to an almighty, holy God. All of us are guilty. And God said, Dave, come here. I'm pardoning you. Why? Because He chose to do so. You understand why Paul says how unfathomable the riches of God is, God's grace are. Why? Because I didn't step forward and say, I on my own merit deserve your grace. Why is God doing this to Israel? Because He chose to do it. Because it's what He wanted to do. It's what He wanted to do. I'll barely step outside of my house to help a neighbor that I see has a need. I mean, really. I'll act as if it's a burden. God steps down from heaven to save a people from eternal hell that we all deserve. Why? Because it's who He is. It's what He wanted to do. What kind of God is that? And we want to question Him, and we don't want to depend upon Him. And then when we go through hiccups in life, or we die early, I'm not saying it's not a horrific thing. What I'm saying is it's only horrific if that end leads to a worse end. For the Christian, that end doesn't lead to a worse end. That end is a stepping stone into a great beginning. It's exactly right. Yeah. So, just great, huge depth here that God is doing through all of this. He says, 23, moreover, as for me, this is Samuel now, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by ceasing to pray for you, but I will instruct you in the good and right way. See, that right there is our stewardship. My stewardship is not to make you live a certain way. It's not my stewardship. I don't own that. My stewardship is to pray for you and to teach, instruct what is the good and right way. That's it. That's it. And that's what Samuel says. Only fear the Lord and serve Him in truth with all of your heart. Now notice this, and you're going to want to underline it and circle it. For consider what great things He has done for you. Now, he just gets through saying, serve Him in truth with all your heart. And in saying that, serve Him in truth with all of your heart, his motivator in relation to that is, consider what great things He's done for you. That's why we said 2 Sundays ago, we always want to adjust behavior. We're looking at the wrong thing. A just desire, behavior will follow. Our problem is we desire the wrong things. The people desired the wrong things. We desire a king. You have a king. Well, why then did you desire a different king? Because you desired the wrong things. Well, how did that happen? You didn't consider all the great things that that king did for you. If you would stop and consider all of the great things that that king did for you, you wouldn't desire another king. So you didn't consider that. That's why I say these 2 chapters are huge about how are you seeing things? How are you discerning things? Because there is a worldly economy and everybody around says this is right, this is good, this is the way that it should be. And then there's a God's economy that basically is going to make you feel like you're insane. Because nobody else sees it that way. Nobody else discerns it that way. But, verse 25, if you still do wickedly, so still, if you still do wickedly, you know, all this stuff's not coming upon you because you were righteous. God's doing these things because of His greatness and His glory. But if you still do wickedly, both you and your king will be swept away. That's why one of the things Roger said earlier, you know, God in teaching us patience, you know why He teaches us patience? Because He is much more patient than what we are or ever will be. He is much more patient than what we are or ever will be. And so my patience that should be extended to others will never be equal to the patience of God, but it should be much greater than what it is or what I recognize in most people who are not Christian. Why? Because the patience of God is much greater than. That's why you get to Revelations, what do they say? How long, O God? How long will you delay? Why is God delaying? God is patiently waiting for you, for those whom He has called and chosen to come into the kingdom. Why? His patience is so much greater than ours. Yeah. All the people that are, yes, 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 yes. And not just people who haven't experienced His grace, people who have experienced His grace. It's you stop and think about it that way, and you're like, what kind of God is this? Yeah.
I just thought of something that I've never noticed before when they were saying, well, God gouge out your eyes, and they said give us 7 days to think about it. But it was 7 days to spend sending messengers to see if there was someone to deliver them, when ideally they were supposed to believe that God.
Exactly right. God's already showed them that He doesn't need help. That's why He did everything He did after the ark was taken. Why did He do all of this after the ark was taken? You got a whole series of events of what God does with the Philistines after the ark is taken. Why is He doing that? Because God doesn't need any help. So the people, like you're saying, Jennifer, the people of Jabesh should say, God is our king. We don't need other people. God is our king. Yeah. No, you won't. Why will you not? You're right. Why will you not? Why will you not? Because God is our king. Because God's our king. But they didn't have that. They didn't have that. And so you could look at that and then say, well, man, what a great victory for Saul. And Saul, man, da, 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 da. The story doesn't say that. The story says just because the Philistines were defeated, just because the Amorites were defeated, does not mean all of this was just such a good righteous act by the people of Israel and King Saul and how he got started such a great start. The whole thing is just totally messed up. God's doing it in spite of all of that.
What really blows your mind about the whole deal, if they didn't want God, but then God was still good enough to use Saul, who the people wanted, which they shouldn't have wanted, to go ahead and give them the victory. So God goes ahead and He still does it underhandedly, gives them the victory.
See, God works through people to accomplish His purpose. But God does not want you to trust in the people through whom He sends. We always want to trust in what we can see. So we're always asking for, that's why you got to be careful. Give me a sign. Let me see you, God. Let me see you, God. Let me see. You have to be careful about that. Because what man wants to do is he wants to trust in what he can see rather than the God that he cannot see. And that's just a part of that old flesh that we're continually having to really bring before God and cut out. Yeah. It's just a continual thing. So, just great, sobering, but great couple of chapters that just really set up now for, again, just a dramatic story, most of which we know a lot of, where Saul's going to have a huge mishap, and there's going to be a turning, and now God's going to search for His king, who's, yeah. The first one, you're seeing pictures. The first one is, this is a king Israel wants that looks like them, who's after their heart. God wants a person who's after His heart. Saul is going to be big, tall, head and shoulders, but his character, his integrity, and all these things are questionable. David, early on, you're going to see all of these things. He's just a boy. He's not even been to war. He's not all, he doesn't fit the mold. He doesn't fit the da-da-da-da-da. And actually, it's only after he gets those things that you see this downfall in relation to him.
You know what's surprising to me about that is that as close as Samuel was to God, that even Samuel didn't see that in David.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that Samuel said, well, this must be the one.
Yeah, this one, and then
Samuel
this one.
said, this must be the
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
And I said, no.
yeah,
All the way through the whole
yeah,
Bible, Samuel thought it was this one.
yeah,
And as close as what he was to God, you would think that,
yeah,
you know.
yep,
See, he couldn't see that because then he could say, well, I know what God wants.
yeah.
That's very possible.
Yeah, and that's continually what the Bible is showing us. The Bible's continually showing us. The Bible is the only book, unlike other ancient literature, that's not going to elevate man throughout the whole story, where man never ever messes up or makes a mistake. Why? Because he's going to show all of our heroes are flawed. You get to the New Testament and he says, these are the ones whom I use: the poor, the maimed, the lame, the mishaps. I use all of them. That's us. All of us are. Why do we have hope? Because it should drive us to trust God. It's God who's doing that work. Yeah, whole thing. Yeah. All right. I know. I know. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it came out of the woodshed. That's right. Father, grateful for this day, grateful for your word, the time that we can spend in it, and just to see your mighty work among your people and just how great you are in comparison to just us. We continually, you give us no reason to turn away from you or flee from you, but we continue to search and desire for lesser things. And so, Father, we just pray that you will show us the greatness of who you are and how good you've been to us in the midst of difficult circumstances, and cause us to lean on you, have faith, trust in you more than what we've ever had before, and to endure with that faith, trust to the end. For your glory's sake, we pray. Amen.